Thanks. Cool, thanks guys. Good job, Dan. So I'm gonna be talking about generative design as it relates to Dynamo and how you can start using it with Project Fractal. Real quick, just as a super quick intro, just because I know time is limited on this, we're kind of doing quick handoff here. Passive design, which most of us are used to, is having a human, sometimes an ugly human, plus a computer, equaling limited design options. When you start dealing with this idea of co-creation and generative design using algorithmic modeling, have still an ugly human, plus an algorithm equals thousands of options. So similar to having like an integrated team, you're able to start doing this with co-creation using algorithms, Dynamo, the computer specifically. So the punchline here, just to give it away, is I'm going to be using Dynamo as kind of the broker between Project Fractal and Revit. And this is how big of a nerd I am. This is my family. We were at Mod Pizza. This is my wife and our 3 boys. And if you're asking if I generatively designed a pizza, I did. So I was at Mod Pizza and I was thinking about, I don't know if any of you have been to Mod Pizza, but you're able to pick your sauce, you're able to pick your dough, you get to pick your toppings and the size, the bread, etc. And so the idea was like, well, it started getting me thinking about this idea of how we design. And so I went through this process and I was thinking, okay, we have, most of us are used to parametric modeling. We're all doing that with Revit. And then we start getting into algorithmic modeling using something like Dynamo. And then we start getting into generative design using Fractal and optioneering. And so this is kind of the process that I'll show you guys. And then hopefully have something a little more practical to show other than pizza. All right, so real quick, I wanna just, for those that don't know, to use Fractal, you have to use Dynamo Studio. So there's a difference between Dynamo Studio. Big shout out to Autodesk, they finally have included it as part of the industry collection as of like 6 months ago, I think. So before you had to pay. And so usually we harp, but this is a good thing. So we have, you used to have to pay $300 for Dynamo Studio. Now it's included, which is pretty sweet. So I'm opening up Dynamo Studio. Some of the limitations, just to throw it out there, is you can't use a lot of packages. So some of the ones that Dan was talking about, RoMBIS, Steam Nodes, all these other ones, unfortunately, are oftentimes whitelisted, but my understanding is they're working on that. So that's one of the limitations that you'll have to think about and consider when using Dynamo Studio. For the purposes of this example, just to kind of introduce you guys, for those that haven't used this, I'm just gonna do a very, very simple generative design example of just a cube. And so in here I have a cuboid by length, and then I can change, you know, this parametrically. I have a color range in here, so I can also change color of the cube. And then the big piece that is really, really important that I found out that I totally screwed up at the very beginning when I first started using this process is because in Dynamo, we often are using just our sliders and we're like, yep, looks good. But the problem is if you have, it's really important to have your min and your max set. If you have a minimum at 0, Fractal crosses it out and said, hey, that's not a good option because there's no geometry there. So something to really keep in mind is your min and max on your slider bars. Make sure that those are really dialed in. And the other thing is for naming. So whatever your slider is named in Dynamo is what it will be called in Fractal. And so just to show you guys, in here I have this guy called fin color, but you can see all these are called number slider. So just to show you, you know, doing this wrong, hopefully, I don't know, you guys probably can't read this in the back, but this says number slider at the top. Well, that's not super helpful for an end user. Like, what is number slider, right? And so like a big piece when you guys start using these tools is min max, and then also rename these. So if you just right click, you can say rename node, set width, rename node, we'll set length, and this guy, height, okay? So now that those are named more appropriately, this is what we'll see in Fractal. The other thing to note when you're publishing to Fractal, is that you get choice of what is an input and what is an output. And so in here, I can click on these and I can choose whether it's an input or not. So if there's some, variations, maybe I don't want thin color, like maybe this is one, maybe this is one that I don't want Fractal to iterate upon. Just simply right clicking on this and saying unchecking is input will not publish it to Fractal. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so for this example, I'm just going to show you guys very quickly how this would work. It's just file, send to web, and then you give it a name. Let's call it cube at RoMBIS. And then you can give it a description. Best designed cube ever. Okay? And then we'll publish that. It says it was successful. We'll go out to Fractal. This is web-based. So if we go to, I'm just going to do Google search Project Fractal. And you can go to My Workspaces. You have to sign in, use your Autodesk. You can see now here's that design that I just published to the web. Cube at RoMBIS. It'll open this up. We'll get a little visual representation of our cube over here. Now, over on the right, we have these different options, these variations. If there's 3, what it's going to do is it's going to take your minimum value of your slider, your maximum value of your slider, and the mid. Okay, those are the 3. If it's 5, it's going to take your min, your max, and then iterate 3 times in between that, and so on and so on. Okay? And so for this, just to make it a little more interesting, I'm just going to apply maybe 5 iterations. And you can see right here, this is going to start telling us how many options we have, not 55. That would be insane. Okay, so we're going to say, and actually let's maybe do 10 on the color. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say generate. And now it's starting to generatively design in Fractal based on the Dynamo parameters that I had inputted. And it's going through all of this process and computing it, in the cloud, somewhere magical. I'm sure like Autodesk leprechauns are actually modeling this somewhere possibly. So you can see I could start getting previews of this. I had different thin colors, and so we're starting to see that represented, and the different sizes. I can start sorting these. I can sort by width. So in here, it'll start sorting by width. I can sort by the length. I can sort by the thin color. And this I can kind of sort and go through the process of optioneering your design. Further, you can go through and start filtering designs. So like, let's say that, I only want to look at all the cubes that are, 4 meters high. These are only the options in there. Or maybe I want to set, the width. It's only the max width on this. So you can see now I'm starting to get all these options. Now this is a cube. Where is this more important or valuable as a data-driven solution? So we were working with a very large general contractor, and through this process, they designed very, very large solar farms. And so we could say, show me the highest density of solar panels with the highest amount of power loads for the least amount of money, and then you can start optioneering and optimizing your building design using data. So this is pretty rad. I'm pretty excited about it because for a very long time, there really hasn't been anything quote unquote productized for generative design. But using something open source like Dynamo allows you to start creating some of these generative design tools and generative design designs. It seems redundant. Okay, how are we doing on time?
We got about 10 minutes left.
10 minutes, okay, cool. All right, so let's look at something a little more interesting than just a cube. We'll start looking at a facade and then how we could actually start bringing this back into Revit once we pick an option, okay? So that's where we're gonna go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, and I actually have a data set because it'd be really laborious to watch me script this whole thing up. And this is actually, another thing just to mention, I mentioned that you can't use packages with Fractal. There is the Celery package, which gives you your graph mapper, similar to anybody that's used Grasshopper. You have these graph mappers. You could use that in Dynamo, but because we can't use those packages with Fractal, we're unable to do this. So I actually just grabbed a little bit of math from online to figure out the sine curve. input this in, excuse me. And so, and here I have things like, you know, fin depth. This will drive the fins. I have this top sine curve. And you can see, like, if I change this, it's iterating upon that. I have the bottom sine curve. Again, iterates upon this one. Let's just roll with this for right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and send this to the web. And we'll say sine curve RoMBIS, if I can type. We got to get the appropriate RoMBIS branding, capital R, lowercase o, uppercase MBIS. All right, sine. Let's do this. Here's your sine. Okay, and then we'll hit publish. Now, I noticed before, and I think the problem that we have with this is I have some components in here, again, that I can't use with Dynamo Studio. Dynamo Studio is separate from Revit. And so it's yelling at me about these, placing these later, and I'll show you guys in just a second what this means. Okay, sine, and sure, publish. Maybe it's still gonna yell at us. I think there's still something in here that it's yelling about that it doesn't like. But let's roll with it anyways. I have an example anyways that's baked up here, and I'll show you guys how this works. Okay, so this is that same option here. And as you can see, I have all these different options. I could go ahead and clear this out. It'll go through, it'll generatively design these. I have 243 design options. I can go through and start, you know, interrogating some of these designs, seeing which ones that I like. I can look at ones that only have a certain fin depth. I can look at ones that only have a certain height. Again, kind of filtering these out like that. So let's just say, like, I get to an option that I like. This one is kind of interesting. Maybe something like this. And then so what I can do is once I have an option that I like, I can click this download button, okay? And I can save this as a Dynamo script. It'll save it right here. And then with Revit Dynamo, I'm gonna open up that version now. So I'm switching from Dynamo Studio to the Revit Dynamo version because now I wanna start interacting with Revit components, which we cannot do with Dynamo Studio, all right? Yep, that's the right one. Second. Should be able to download this as a script. Let's try this again. Did Nick ever show up? Because if he didn't, guess who gets to go into his time slot? Just teasing. Oh, you're there. You are here. How you doing, sir? Dang it. No, it's good. All right, I got to cut it short here. He's going to have way more interesting stuff to talk about. So, all right. Let's try this again. Zoom's getting in my way. Okay. So in here now I have this design that we grabbed from Dynamo or from Fractal. I think it may not have been the exact option, but that's okay. I want to show you guys this point of how you can start connecting this now to Revit. So over here I have these components. I'm going to delete this guy and show you guys how to do this. So what we're going to do is, here we are. What I've done is I've hooked up a place adaptive component, And Dan was showing the list transpose. I'm also using that same node. Basically what's going on here is you have this series. What it's doing is it's counting these from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way across. And what I'm doing is I'm using this list transpose so that it's actually going to be placing the points along, and I'm scaling it too. There we go. And so what it's doing now is rather than counting left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4. So it switches your rows to columns and your columns to rows. Okay, so that's what's going on. And that's really important when placing adaptive components. And then so what I have is I have my place adaptive components by points. And then I have a 4-point adaptive component that's loaded into my project. And then so when I run this, it'll actually place the family over on this side. It's supposed to. Do you love like live presentations? Aren't they the best?
You're making it look easy, though.
Right. So curious why this one isn't placing. We might have to talk to the Dynamo guru, Aaron, over here. But in here, this place adaptive component, sometimes I know too, if you unhook it and rehook it up, it's like kind of resets it. Let's just see real quick. I don't want to cut into Nick's time. So family goes into type. Your points go into points and you run it. And it's supposed to place the adaptive components. It's the joy of live presentations. But this is the way this would typically work. So going through Dynamo to Fractal, picking your option, downloading the option, bring it into Revit. Keep in mind the differences between Dynamo Studio and Dynamo for Revit. You can start interacting with your components on the Revit side for Dynamo for Revit, and then you can actually start translating that geometry over into an actual Revit environment. All right, and with that, I'm going to, are we good? Time's up.
You got 2.5 minutes.
Do I really?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
I know, you make it look easy.
All right, 2.5 minutes, okay.
Can you take some questions?
Yeah, let's do some questions. Questions about the process, going to Dynamo, to Fractal, to Revit, optioneering. Yes, sir.
So let's say on your box example in Fractal, if you wanted to have a column for the floor area that we're building maybe total surface area, can you add like output? Is it somehow calculated from what's generated?
Yes, absolutely. So trying to grab area from that, from the box example, you can absolutely grab area. So like if I say area, I can use the area node and hook that up. And then I could use like my watch node and hook that up. I was actually doing this for a client. And so in here, I'm starting to get area totals. And what's really cool is you can start now looking at this, you know, as you're going through and flexing, say, a building footprint, you know, you're getting real-time feedback if you're meeting your grossing square footages on that. Surface is, that's a good question. The cuboid, I think it could be, I don't know. It's a good question, Joe.
If you right click on that watch node, can you set that to, oh, you know what it is? If you rename that watch node, just call it area.
Yep. And publish it.
And publish it again.
Yep.
I think it shows up in your parallel chart. That's
yep.
Something you can filter on.
Yep.
Did you show that already?
I did not.
You have to rename it. That's kind of the.
Yeah, I was asking Aaron about that. I was trying to remember what the. Yeah. And box 2.0. Yeah. So that's a good point, Tobias. Thanks for bringing that up. So you guys will see this. We go back to Fractal. Yeah, box 2.0. You have this column right here, which is a output. And so as we go through and generate, you know, different options, maybe bump this up. And iterate upon those. These gives your area. But I think the question still is if it's a surface area or just the ground area. It's a good question. So that gives you your output in here, which is really useful.
Your time is up if you want to be saved by the bell.
That'll work. Just super quick, if anyone's ever interested, I have a whole bunch of free Dynamo scripts. So like if you guys are looking to try to get into it, we have like a randomized curtain wall or a point attractor, family rename one. We were having some fun on April Fools of like prefabricate your pet. You guys are trying to get into CNC. So you guys can check out some of those too and download some scripts for free. So that's out there as well. Show's yours, Nick.
Can you hit stop share?
Yep.
And then everybody give a huge round of applause to those.